in a plant like this, nobody is autonomous here. I mean, every single piece of the operation has to connect to something else. And it's interesting, at least, a lot of and that's why I was particularly interested in Morningstar. A lot of the examples you see of, these really kind of interesting, highly decentralized cellular organizations are, take a place like Google where the average team is 4 to 7 people, and they tend to work on fairly small autonomous projects. It's very rare to see the kind of management philosophy you're talking about, or organizational principles. Very rare to see this in a highly capital-intensive, process-intensive industry. So if when I talk about some ideas to, let's say, a big oil company, they say, well, Gary, that's like great for Google, but it's never going to work like in our thing where we got to have all the safety and the reliability and so on. So I guess one of the questions I'd ask, Chris, is how do you square not just the notion of freedom with discipline, but how do you square the notion of freedom with the fact that you are managing a highly integrated, highly complex coordination problem, through your batch flows and so on. So
we're still people. We're just coordinating as people. We may have more tools, being big machinery, to effect our job, and they have little tools called computers to assist them in leveraging their actions, but it's all human actions. The machinery just leverages our physical actions. The computer leverages mental actions. But it's still human beings working together. So I don't see any difference whatsoever from one perspective. The other perspective you started out with was, okay, we've got a lot of safety issues, we've got big machinery, it can hurt people, and so you, quote, need more discipline. Well, there's no question. The folks in those jobs do need to come to an agreement and act on that agreement that they will act in a certain way. That doesn't mean less freedom. I think you have freedom when you fly on an airplane, you feel it, but when you go on an airplane, there's a captain, he's in charge. You get on the plane with the comfort, actually, that there is a captain who's going to keep us all coordinated and in line. So what's freedom, what's not freedom? So when you agree to act in a certain way, it doesn't mean you're unfree. You've agreed to act in a certain way. And when I'm going to operate a forklift, here's how I'm going to act. And my agreement with the other folks in the enterprise is such that I am going to act in that manner. So within this realm, I'm going to do exactly these things. We all agreed on that. Period. Now, when I get out of that realm and I'm not on a forklift, and we're here talking about what kind of forklifts we should buy, they're just like Google. So a person's not free or unfree. They're free given the arrangements they've made with other individuals and the circumstances they're in.
But I guess what you would say is that those arrangements or those boundaries or the edges of a sandbox, how we describe it.
Yes.
In a typical company, those are imposed. Somebody gives you the standard operating procedures. What you're describing, I think, is an organization where those are negotiated or where those are the subject of discussion. Not here's a boss, but we all know what we're trying to get. The mission is clear. We all have the same metrics. Here's actually how we're doing. This is not so. Like, how do we sit around? So just maybe describe a little bit more practically, mechanically, how do the boundary conditions, the rules, the regulations, the SOPs, how do they get set in an organization where there are not a lot of managers?
There are a lot of managers. Each one's managing their own mission. So here's my mission to take these containers from here to here. Now, how I describe self-management, which you really haven't done, and it's really quite simple in the sense of what does it do? It's developing structure from what you'd call below, most people say below, versus dictated from above. So it's a spontaneous development. So it's how you develop structure, not whether you have structure. Structure to me is defined as a set of relationships that individuals have with other individuals. So you develop a structure when you get married. You make a deal. Now it's changing and it's moving and it's fluid, but you have a basic deal, and then you make more deals along the way. But that's a structure, a commitment from A to B. I'm going to provide this report to you. I'm going to deliver this package to you. I'm going to move containers from here to here. I'm going to operate this equipment in a certain fashion. But you make a deal between people. So it's how you develop structure, bottom up or top down. So spontaneous orders is the term, perhaps. So it's not totally spontaneous. When you go into a store, when you go into a relationship with somebody, you develop an agreement with those folks. You have say, they have say. In a, quote, free environment, democracy, whatnot, you have a lot of freedom to go ahead and make arrangements. And you go ahead and make those arrangements. When you make a deal, you made a deal, though, and you're expected to keep that deal. So that's the discipline part. So the discipline does get driven into the organization. It's not just freebie any old time you want to do anything you want. That doesn't work at all. So you do develop a structure. It's how the structure is developed. And developing it from in a spontaneous order, there's more fluidity, and it can then, the cloud can then change form more easily than if you fixate it from above. And that's the key advantage that I feel with self-management. It's not that big of a mystery.